Rain lashed the dark, deserted streets as the lone figure hurried along the sidewalk, a manila envelope clutched tightly under their coat. The dim glow of street lamps cast an eerie, foreboding atmosphere over the suburban neighborhood. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the silence. The person froze, heartbeat pounding, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Another crack, this time closer. They broke into a desperate sprint, shoes splashing through puddles, adrenaline surging. Rounding a corner, they spotted the looming gates of the gated community, the HOA logo ominously lit up. Asterisk almost their asterisk, but just as they reached the intercom, a hand clamped down on their shoulder. "Going somewhere, Mr. Erickson?" A gruff voice growled. Michael Erickson whirled around to find himself staring down the barrel of a gun, held by a burly HOA security guard. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You've been poking your nose where it doesn't belong," the guard sneered. "The HOA doesn't take kindly to that." He gestured with the gun. "Now hand over the envelope and let's take a little trip to the community center. The board is eager to have a discussion with you." Michael's mind raced considering his options. There was no way he could overpower the armed guard. But he couldn't let the HOA get their hands on those documents. They contained the proof he needed to expose their web of lies and corruption. Summoning every ounce of courage, he made his decision. In one swift motion, he tossed the envelope high into the air, sending it sailing over the gate. The guard gaped in surprise, momentarily distracted, and Michael seized the chance. He barreled forward, slamming his shoulder into the guard's chest. The guard stumbled backward, momentarily losing his grip on the gun. Michael tackled him to the ground, wrestling for control of the weapon. They grappled furiously, Michael's desperation fueling his strength. Just as the guard's finger tightened on the trigger, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Both men froze, the guard's face twisting with panic. "Damn it," he growled, shoving Michael off and scrambling to his feet. "This isn't over, Erickson. The HOA always gets what it wants." With that, he turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows. Michael lay on the wet pavement, chest heaving, heart pounding. The sirens grew louder and he knew he had to move fast. Ignoring the throbbing pain in his shoulder, he climbed to his feet and hurried toward the gate. On the other side, the envelope lay untouched. Michael snatched it up and sprinted toward his car, praying the evidence inside would finally expose the HOA's sinister machinations. As he peeled out of the neighborhood, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous battle. The HOA had made its move, and now Michael was in their crosshairs. But he was no mere pawn. He was a strategic mastermind, ready to use their own rulebook against them. This war had just begun, and he intended to win, no matter the cost. Michael Erickson paced the length of his living room, the manila envelope containing the damning HOA documents clutched tightly in his hand. His mind raced, trying to piece together a plan of attack. The HOA had made their move, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted, whether that meant silencing him permanently or retrieving the evidence he possessed. He had to act fast before they could retaliate. Glancing down at the envelope, Michael steeled his resolve. This was his chance to finally expose the HOA's corruption and bring them to justice. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, people who were willing to risk everything to take down the powerful and ruthless Homeowners Association. Grabbing his phone, Michael quickly dialed a number. "Hey, it's me," he said in a hushed tone. "I need your help. The HOA is onto me, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." On the other end of the line, his old friend and former colleague, Detective Sarah Wilkins, listened intently. "What have you got, Michael?" she asked, her voice tense with concern. Michael outlined the events of the previous night, detailing the confrontation with the HOA security guard and the incriminating documents he now possessed. "I need to get this evidence to the FBI," he concluded, "but the HOA is watching my every move. I can't do it alone." Sarah was silent for a moment, the wheels in her mind clearly turning. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," she said finally. "I'll arrange a meeting with the FBI, but you'll need to get the documents to me first. I'll have a safe house set up, and we'll go from there." Michael let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you, Sarah. I owe you one." "Just be careful, Michael," she warned. "The HOA is not going to let this go without a fight. They'll be coming for you, and they won't play by the rules." "I know," Michael replied, his grip tightening on the envelope. "But I'm ready for them. This ends today." After disconnecting the call, Michael turned his attention to the documents. He carefully extracted them, scanning the pages with a mixture of anger and determination. The evidence was damning, proof of kickbacks, fraud, and a web of deceit that stretched deep into the HOA's leadership. Michael's jaw tightened as he read on, his resolve hardening. The HOA had gone too far, and they needed to be stopped. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the entire community, for the families who had been victimized by the HOA's tyrannical rule. Glancing out the window, Michael's eyes narrowed as he spotted a familiar SUV parked down the street. The HOA was watching, waiting for him to make a move, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. This was his game now, and he was going to play it on his own terms. Gathering the documents, Michael tucked them safely into the envelope and headed for the door. He had a meeting to arrange with the FBI, and he wasn't going to let anything or anyone stand in his way. As he stepped out into the night, the rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. Michael knew the HOA wouldn't give up without a fight, but he was prepared. This was his final stand, and he was determined to win. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and the battle for the fate of the entire community was about to begin. The neon sign of the dimly lit diner flickered as Michael Erickson stepped through the door, his eyes scanning the small, deserted establishment. This was the rendezvous point he and Sarah had agreed upon, a safe haven away from the prying eyes of the HOA. As he made his way to the back booth, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The HOA's presence had become a constant weight on his shoulders, a never-ending threat that lurked in the shadows. But he refused to let their intimidation tactics sway him. He had come too far to back down now. Sliding into the booth, Michael waited anxiously for Sarah to arrive. The precious envelope containing the damning HOA documents was tucked safely inside his jacket, a tangible reminder of the high stakes at play. Just as he was about to reach for his phone, the bell above the diner's door jingled and Sarah Wilkins strode in, her expression tense but determined. "Michael," she said, quickly sliding into the seat across from him. "You made it." "I did," he replied, leaning forward, "and I have the documents right here." He patted his jacket for emphasis. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "Good. That's good." She paused, her gaze darting around the diner. "We need to move fast, Michael. The FBI is waiting, but we have to be careful. The HOA is watching your every move." Michael nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. "I know. That's why I need to get these documents to the FBI as soon as possible. This is our chance to bring them down once and for all." Sarah studied him for a moment, her brow furrowed. "You realize this isn't going to be easy, right? The HOA has deep pockets and powerful allies. They're not going to go down without a fight." "I'm counting on it," Michael replied, a grim determination in his voice. "This is my chance to use their own rules and tactics against them. They've been terrorizing this community for too long, and it's time for it to end." Sarah shook her head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You always were the strategic one, Michael. All right, let's do this." As they exited the diner and climbed into Sarah's unmarked police car, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension. The HOA was watching, he was sure of it. They were waiting for him to make his move, and he knew he had to be one step ahead. The drive to the FBI field office was tense, the air thick with the weight of the impending confrontation. Michael gripped the envelope tightly, his knuckles turning white. This was it, the moment of truth. When they finally arrived, Sarah led Michael through the imposing glass doors and into the bustling offices of the FBI. They were met by a stern-faced agent who ushered them into a private conference room. "Mr. Erickson," the agent said, his gaze hard and uncompromising. "We've been expecting you. I understand you have some information for us regarding the HOA." Michael took a deep breath and nodded, placing the envelope on the table. "This contains evidence of corruption, fraud, and abuse of power within the Oakwood Homeowners Association. I need your help to bring them down." The agent reached for the envelope, his expression unreadable. "We'll need to thoroughly review these documents before we can take any action. But I can assure you, if what you say is true, the FBI will do everything in its power to put a stop to the HOA's illegal activities." As the agent began to examine the documents, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The first step had been taken, and now the real battle could begin. The HOA's reign of terror was about to come to an end, and he was determined to be the one to bring them down. The conference room at the FBI field office was tense with anticipation as Agent Johnson pored over the documents Michael Erickson had provided. The evidence of the Oakwood Homeowners Association's widespread corruption and abuse of power was damning, laying bare a web of deceit and manipulation that had terrorized the community for years. Michael watched the agent's face intently, his own expression a mixture of relief and determination. After years of struggling against the HOA's tyrannical rule, he had finally found a way to fight back, and the FBI's involvement was a crucial step towards bringing them to justice. "This is quite extensive, Mr. Erickson," Agent Johnson said, his brow furrowed as he continued to flip through the pages. "Kickbacks, fraud, intimidation. It's all here. If what you provided is accurate, the HOA is in deep trouble." Michael nodded, leaning forward in his chair. "It's all true, Agent Johnson. I've been gathering this evidence for months, trying to find a way to expose the HOA's corruption. But they've been watching my every move, and I knew I couldn't do it alone." Agent Johnson looked up, his gaze sharpening. "You realize the risks you're taking by coming to us with this information, don't you? The HOA is not going to take this lying down. They have considerable resources and influence, and they won't hesitate to use them to silence you. I know, Michael replied, his voice steady, but I'm not afraid of them anymore. I've seen firsthand the damage they've done to this community, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. The truth needs to come out, no matter the cost. The agent nodded, his expression thoughtful. Well, I can assure you that the FBI will do everything in its power to protect you and ensure that justice is served. We'll need to thoroughly investigate these allegations, but I can already see that we have a strong case. He paused, his gaze flickering to the manila envelope. However, I must caution you, Mr. Erickson. The HOA is not going to take this lying down. They'll be coming after you, and they won't play by the rules. You need to be extremely careful, both for your own safety and the integrity of this investigation. Michael's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. I'm ready for them, Agent Johnson. I've been planning for this moment for a long time. The HOA's reign of terror ends today. The agent studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well. We'll need to act quickly to secure the evidence and build our case. In the meantime, I suggest you stay out of sight and let us handle the HOA. They won't hesitate to retaliate, and I don't want to see you or anyone else get caught in the crossfire. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah Wilkins, who had been silent up until this point, placed a hand on his arm. He's right, Michael. It's time to let the professionals handle this. You've done your part. Now let us do ours. Michael looked from Sarah to Agent Johnson, his gaze filled with a fierce determination. All right, but I want to be kept in the loop. This is my fight, too, and I'm not going to sit on the sidelines while the HOA tries to wriggle their way out of this. Agent Johnson nodded. Fair enough. We'll keep you informed, but for now, I suggest you lay low. The HOA is about to get a rude awakening, and they won't go down without a fight. As Michael and Sarah left the FBI field office, the weight of the impending confrontation hung heavy in the air. The HOA's days of unchecked power were numbered, but the battle was far from over. Michael knew that he was about to be thrust into the eye of the storm, and he couldn't wait to see the look on the HOA's face when the truth finally came to light. The neon sign of the Oakwood Community Center cast an eerie glow over the rain-soaked streets as the HOA board gathered in an emergency meeting. Tension hung thick in the air as the members, their faces shadowed by the dim lighting, exchanged worried glances. This is a disaster, hissed Mrs. Wilkins, the HOA president, her manicured nails drumming anxiously on the polished conference table. How could Erickson have possibly obtained those documents? The room fell silent as the other board members contemplated the gravity of the situation. The evidence Erickson had gathered was undeniable, and the threat of an FBI investigation loomed large. We need to act fast, Mr. Belmont, the HOA's legal counsel, interjected. If the FBI gets their hands on those documents, it's game over. We need to neutralize Erickson and retrieve that evidence before it's too late. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her eyes narrowing. Agreed. I want Erickson found and silenced permanently if necessary. We can't let him ruin everything we've built here. The other board members murmured their assent, the air crackling with a dangerous determination. The HOA had spent years consolidating its power, manipulating and exploiting the homeowners for their own gain. They weren't about to let it all come crashing down now. I'll have our security team locate Erickson immediately, Mr. Belmont said, already reaching for his phone. And I'll make some calls to our other assets. We need to nip this in the bud before the FBI can act. Mrs. Wilkins leaned back in her chair, a cold, calculating smile spreading across her face. Good. Do whatever it takes, Belmont. I want those documents back, and I want Erickson dealt with. This community belongs to the HOA, and we're not about to let some meddling homeowner take that away from us. As the meeting adjourned, the HOA board members filed out, their expressions grim and determined. The stakes were higher than ever, and they knew they couldn't afford to lose. The community had always been their domain, and they had no intention of relinquishing that control. Meanwhile, Michael Erickson sat in the dimly lit safe house, his eyes fixed on the television as the news coverage of the HOA's alleged corruption unfolded. He could feel the tension building, the calm before the storm. The HOA was on the move, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Beside him, Sarah Wilkins watched the news with a furrowed brow. The HOA is not going to take this lying down, Michael. They're going to come after you with everything they've got. Michael nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. I know, but I'm ready for them. I've been planning for this moment for a long time, and I'm not about to back down now. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the now familiar manila envelope. The FBI has the evidence they need to take down the HOA. All I have to do is keep it safe until they're ready to act. Sarah's expression was one of both admiration and concern. You're playing a dangerous game, Michael. The HOA isn't going to play by the rules. They'll stop at nothing to get those documents back. I'm counting on it, Michael replied, a steely determination in his voice. This is my chance to use their own tactics against them. The HOA has been terrorizing this community for far too long, and it's time for it to end. As the rain continued to lash against the windows, Michael knew that the final showdown was drawing near. The HOA's lies were about to be exposed, and he was determined to be the one to bring them down, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as Michael Erickson paced the confines of the safe house, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The HOA was on the hunt, and he knew they wouldn't rest until they had retrieved the damning documents he had entrusted to the FBI. Beside him, Sarah Wilkins watched with a mix of admiration and concern. "You're sure you're up for this, Michael?" she asked, her voice low and measured. "The HOA is not going to play fair, and they have a lot of resources at their disposal." Michael's jaw tightened, his gaze resolute. "I have to be Sarah. This is my chance to finally put an end to the HOA's reign of terror. I can't back down now, not when we're so close to exposing the truth." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "I know the risks, but I'm willing to take them. The community has suffered for too long under the HOA's oppressive rule, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Sarah nodded, her expression somber. "All right, then let's do this. But you need to be careful, Michael. The HOA is not going to go down without a fight, and they'll stop at nothing to get those documents back." As if on cue, the safe house phone rang, its shrill ring piercing the tense silence. Michael exchanged a wary glance with Sarah before picking up the receiver. "Hello?" "Mr. Erickson." A cold, calculated voice responded. "This is Mrs. Wilkins, the president of the Oakwood Homeowners Association. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Michael's grip tightened on the phone, his heart pounding. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mrs. Wilkins." A soft chuckle echoed through the line. "Don't play dumb with me, Erickson. We know you have the documents and we want them back. Now, that's not going to happen," Michael retorted, his voice laced with defiance. "The truth needs to come out, and the FBI is going to make sure of that." "The FBI?" Mrs. Wilkins scoffed. "Do you really think they can protect you, Erickson? The HOA has resources and influence that reach far beyond your little safe house. You're a dead man walking." Michael felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to show any fear. "I'm not afraid of you, Mrs. Wilkins. The HOA's reign of terror ends today." "We'll see about that," the HOA president hissed. "You have until tomorrow to hand over those documents, or we'll be paying you a little visit. And trust me, Erickson, you won't like what happens then." The line went dead, leaving Michael staring at the receiver, his mind racing with 1,000 different scenarios. The HOA was closing in, and they were playing for keeps. "We need to move Sarah," he said, his voice urgent. "The HOA is coming, and they want those documents back. We need to get them to the FBI before it's too late." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "All right, let's go. But we need to be careful, Michael. The HOA is watching our every move, and they won't hesitate to take us down if they have the chance." As they made their way out of the safe house, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The HOA had drawn a line in the sand, and he knew they wouldn't back down without a fight, but he was ready. This was his chance to finally put an end to the HOA's corruption, and he wasn't about to let them slip through his fingers. The stage was set, and the final showdown was about to begin. The rain pounded against the windows of the FBI field office as Michael Erickson and Sarah Wilkins hurried inside, the precious manila envelope clutched tightly in Michael's hand. The air was electric with a sense of urgency, as if the very walls were holding their breath in anticipation. Agent Johnson greeted them at the entrance, his expression grave. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Erickson. The HOA has been making some very concerning moves." Michael's heart pounded in his chest, but he held the agent's gaze with unwavering determination. "They know about the documents, Agent Johnson. They're coming for them, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." The agent's brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "That's what I was afraid of. We need to move quickly then." He gestured for them to follow, leading them deeper into the bustling office. As they walked, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The HOA was closing in, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to use any means necessary to retrieve the incriminating evidence. The stakes had never been higher, and the fate of the entire community hung in the balance. When they reached the conference room, Agent Johnson ushered them inside and closed the door, cutting off the muffled sounds of the office. "All right, Mr. Erickson, let's see what you've got." Michael carefully placed the envelope on the table, his fingers lingering on the worn edges. "This contains the proof we need to take down the HOA. Fraud, corruption, abuse of power. It's all in there." Agent Johnson nodded, his expression grim. "We've been reviewing the documents you provided, and I can assure you that the evidence is more than compelling. The FBI is ready to move forward with a full-scale investigation." Michael felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly tempered by the weight of the situation. "How much time do we have, Agent Johnson? The HOA is coming for these documents, and they won't stop until they get them back." The agent's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. We've already put a plan in motion, Mr. Erickson. We're going to secure these documents and get the necessary warrants to raid the HOA's offices, but we need to move fast before they can retaliate. Sarah, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up. What about Michael's safety? The HOA is not going to take this lying down. They'll come after him with everything they've got. Agent Johnson's gaze shifted to Michael, his expression grave. We'll do everything in our power to protect you, Mr. Erickson. But the truth is, you're already a target. The HOA knows you're the one who exposed them, and they won't hesitate to eliminate that threat. Michael felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to back down. I'm not afraid of them, Agent Johnson. I've come too far to give up now. The agent nodded, a faint glimmer of respect in his eyes. I admire your courage, Mr. Erickson, but you need to understand the gravity of the situation. The HOA is a powerful and ruthless adversary, and they'll stop at nothing to regain control. He paused, his gaze shifting to the envelope. We'll move as quickly as we can to secure the evidence and take down the HOA. But in the meantime, I suggest you and Detective Wilkins stay low and let us handle the rest. Michael knew he didn't have a choice. The FBI was their best chance at bringing the HOA down, and he had to trust that they would do what was necessary. With a deep breath, he nodded. All right, Agent Johnson, let's do this. As they left the conference room, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the final showdown was looming. The HOA's reign of terror was about to come to an end, but the cost might be higher than anyone could have imagined. The air was thick with tension as the FBI agents executed the raid on the Oakwood Homeowners Association's headquarters. The building was surrounded by a phalanx of heavily armored vehicles, their sirens blaring through the rain-soaked night. Michael Erickson watched the spectacle unfold from the safety of the FBI field office, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and trepidation. After years of fighting against the HOA's corruption and oppression, the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Beside him, Sarah Wilkins gripped his arm, her eyes fixed on the television screen that was broadcasting the live feed from the raid. This is it, Michael, she whispered, her voice tinged with a hint of awe. They're finally going down. Michael nodded, his jaws set in a determined line. It's about damn time. He turned to Agent Johnson, who was overseeing the operation from the command center. Any word on the HOA's response? The agent's expression was grim. We're expecting them to put up a fight, but we're prepared. The FBI has secured the perimeter, and we've got agents positioned throughout the building. They won't be able to escape this time. Michael's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair, his knuckles turning white. And the documents, are they safe? Agent Johnson nodded. The evidence is secure, and our forensic team is already combing through it. We'll have a full report for you as soon as possible. The sound of shattering glass and muffled gunfire crackled through the speakers, drawing everyone's attention back to the screen. The FBI agents were engaged in a fierce firefight with HOA security guards, their weapons blazing through the chaos. Michael held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. This was it, the final showdown between the forces of justice and the tyrannical HOA. The outcome would determine the fate of the entire community, and he couldn't afford to lose. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerged from the building, flanked by a group of armed guards. Michael's eyes widened as he recognized the cold, calculating features of Mrs. Wilkins, the HOA president. There she is, he exclaimed, pointing at the screen. That's the one who's been behind all of this. Agent Johnson's expression hardened. Copy that. We've got eyes on the target. Move in teams. The FBI agents surged forward, their weapons at the ready as Mrs. Wilkins and her entourage attempted to flee the scene. The chase was on, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse that played out in the rain-soaked streets. Michael watched, his heart in his throat, as the drama unfolded. The HOA's carefully constructed facade of power and influence was crumbling before his eyes, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Finally, after a tense standoff, Mrs. Wilkins and her co-conspirators were apprehended, their wrists bound in handcuffs. The FBI had triumphed, and the HOA's reign of terror was over. As the news cameras descended on the scene, Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of relief and pride. The community had been liberated from the clutches of the corrupt and manipulative HOA, and it was all thanks to the courage and determination of those who refused to be silenced. It's over, Michael, Sarah whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. You did it. You took down the HOA. Michael nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. We did it, Sarah. The community is finally free. As the dust settled and the investigation continued, Michael knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one. The HOA's tentacles had spread far and wide, and it would take time and effort to undo the damage they had done. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope, a belief that the future of Oakwood was brighter than ever before. The HOA's lies had been exposed, and the FBI's final warning had been heeded. The community had won, and the path to true justice and transparency had been paved.